What do you do when you don't understand? And Judas, we know what Judas does because he doesn't understand. What does Matthew do? What does Peter do? What was Pilate thinking the days leading up to his big decision to bring Jesus before the people and let the Jews and argue about it? What was Claudia thinking, his wife, as we know that she had dreams and was scared and believed that Pilate should leave Jesus alone? Herod, Caiaphas, the religious leaders, we spend time with them this year, but not in a way that makes it feel like you're doing homework. We understand what it's like to be part of something that is growing rapidly, has its detractors, but also has its supporters, and can sometimes be all-consuming. And that's been really interesting too, to kind of observe, go, wow, okay, God's been teaching us something so that we can help teach others through the show.
Welcome, my name is Kevin, and this is the Bible Artist Podcast, and I've got a very special guest today. Dallas Jenkins is the creator, co-writer, executive producer, and a director for The Chosen, the biggest and most successful Bible show of our time. Dallas, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kevin. This has been a long time coming. I have long admired your work and appreciated it. And I don't know how long you've been doing this, but it feels like several years at least, if not, I don't know if it's 3, 4, 5, whatever, but I remember seeing some posts come across like social media every now and then, and I would check them out every now and then. I'm like, man, this guy's really smart and really intuitive and really is doing what I am hoping people do, which is treating the show not as the end game. For some people it is. For some people, they just want to watch a show that they like, but to go deeper into it. And so I've just always appreciated it and tried to kind of elevate things that you've said to more people and help where I can. Not because it helps my show. And I say this respectfully. It's not like you're bringing in new viewers to the show, although I'm sure there's maybe a couple, but it's just that you're doing what I'm hoping people do, and you're taking yourself and anyone who reads you deeper. And I just really encourage, like I'm frequently encouraging anyone who hasn't read your articles or seen some of your videos to really do so. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. That means so much. I'm really grateful to be able to contribute to what you're doing and help people to enjoy it. I'm grateful to hear that, that you've enjoyed it and it's been helpful to other people too. So thanks a lot. So I want to ask you some big picture questions about Bible adaptation and your experience as a creator eventually. But before we get there, I think I'll start with Chosen Season 5, since it's just a couple months away. And I'm curious, what gets you most excited about this upcoming season?
Everything. I mean, I think this is going to be your favorite season so far. I think people like yourself who not only appreciate good entertainment, but who love taking Bible stories and translating them into a digestible. Obviously it's already digestible, but I'm saying in a TV show or a movie, sometimes when it's just a word for word reenactment, it has a sterility to it that belongs more in the reading world. When you're reading something, the fact that it's just words on a page, you can then add something to your own mind, and it can be exciting or interesting or visual or something that connects with your own personality. But when you're watching someone else's visuals and all they're doing is just recreating what was on the page, it doesn't bring anything new to the table. And I think that for those of you who know the Bible and like reading the gospel stories, this season is the plot is locked in. We can't, it's not like even season 4 where we could create entirely new plot lines that take months, or take weeks or whatever. We have 1 week, or in this case, 5 days basically. And it's not like we can go too far, left or right, within the outside of the story. So we have more boundaries this season than ever before, which in many ways makes it even more creative, because we have to come up with, okay, what was Pilate thinking the days leading up to his big decision to to bring Jesus before the people and let the Jews and argue about it. What was Claudia thinking, his wife, as we know that she had dreams and was scared and believed that Pilate should leave Jesus alone. Herod, Caiaphas, the religious leaders, we spend time with them this year, but not in a way that makes it feel like you're doing homework. You really get to know them and see what they're experiencing and see what they are seeing and understand why Jesus was in peril and what it was exactly that caused them to say some of the things we see in Scripture. But of course, if that was all it was, then it would be just a standard political show. What was Jesus going through? We know that in the Gospels, this was the week when he had several lamentations, right? Where he's crying over Jerusalem. He's crying over its future. He's angry at a fig tree, right? Like what in the world, like, how do you unpack that passage? That's so bizarre. And yet when you do unpack it and you realize it's connected to the temple and it's connected to the flipping of the tables and it's connected to the Last Supper and he's doing it as an object lesson for his disciples, you go, okay, well that's a whole episode, right?
Yeah.
So I'm so excited to bring some of these iconic stories to life, because I think sometimes when we read stories about Holy Week, they're all packed in together. And so they can kind of get lost in the shuffle. You're just thinking, and this big thing happened, and then this big thing happened, and then he got arrested, and it's easy to kind of gloss over some of them. And so I'm really excited to spend time with each of these moments. Jesus preaching in the temple and the people wondering if they hear God's voice. Like that was almost one we were like, maybe we shouldn't do that because it's too weird. But
I was wondering,
yeah. Maybe I didn't know if I'm supposed to keep that as a spoiler free or not, but you usually expose spoilers before you even know that they're spoilers anyway. So yeah, we do stuff like that. And now that you know Shmuel and and you've been introduced to Gedera and Zebediah and some of these other leaders, when Jesus is yelling at him and calling him, condemned to, how can you escape being condemned to hell? It hits harder now, right? So all of these things I'm really excited about. And then just the visuals. This is the biggest season we've done by far. I mean, you can't get bigger than the Walking on Water, but I mean, this is just a full season of huge moments and huge backdrops. And we used widescreen cameras this year. So it's on a new aspect ratio for those of you who care about that kind of stuff. It's on 239 this year. Typically it's 1.85, which is, it's like 1.85 would be more like this. 239 is like this, right? I don't know if you can see this, but like it's a little bit narrower, but it's wider. I actually did Best Christmas Pageant Ever that way, where you're able to see more things in the frame, left and right than you normally are. And this season really demands it.
Yeah, I was really impressed looking at the teaser trailer, just some of the composition of the shots, like the symmetry, and just it looks like very beautiful just from what we've been able to see so far. So I'm really excited for that. And like you said, to get into the head of some of these characters and see some scenes which I feel like they've probably showed up in like some Bible adaptations that are like, like the word for word approach, but probably haven't showed up in as many Jesus movies before. Like the cursing the fig tree. I bet that's one that doesn't generally show up very often. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff to look forward to.
Yeah, and it does. And when it does show up, I mean, there's so much theological richness during Holy Week that Jesus is saying to the disciples and teaching that is going right over their heads, because they have no hallway for the death and resurrection, even though he's telling them it's going to happen. I'm going to die. I'm going to get tortured. Then I'm going to rise up. And when I rise up, I'm going to go before you to Galilee. And they're just like, what's this supposed to mean? What's the metaphor here? And he's like, it's not a metaphor. Well, it has to be a metaphor. And so there's so much theological richness that we get to explore this season, and that you don't get when you just portray it word for word from Scripture, because Scripture even demands that a pastor or someone, a commentary to explain, why would he curse a fig tree? What does he mean by this phrase? People always love to say that Scripture is sufficient. And that is true. It's sufficient for salvation and good works, but it's not enough for you to understand everything Jesus said. The gospel writers were writing to a Jewish audience at a time when they would have understood the references. And even then, some of them didn't understand it because they didn't know it until he resurrected what he meant.
Hmm.
But there's no way for us to fully understand this without some context. And that's what I'm excited to bring.
Yeah, I'm curious. So, each season of The Chosen, it has like some of its own emphases. Like season four, you really got into walking with Jesus through grief and suffering. A bit of that in season three too. But I'm curious with season five, anything you can tell us about some of the big picture like themes and uh, topics that we'll be seeing.
Yeah. There's a lot of what do you do when you don't understand? So in seasons 3 and 4, it's we're walking with Jesus in the midst of suffering. Um, and then at the end of season 4, Thomas is the one saying, I don't understand. Why would you do this? Why would you? And Jesus is saying, just stay with me. Just stay with me. It's going, in time, some of this will make sense. But it even ends, season 4 ends with, or not episode 7 of season 4 ends with Mary Magdalene saying, I guess we'll never fully know, at least not this side of, and of course she's referring to the side of heaven. Um, but what does it look like during Holy Week to not really understand a lot of what he's saying? Like
Hmm.
that we see a side of Jesus we've never seen before when he's turning over the
Hmm.
tables in the temple. And we see a scene where the disciples gather afterwards and like, what the heck was that? Like, like people might have gotten hurt. Like
Hmm.
people just lost some of their income.
Hmm.
Um, Philip is pointing out he didn't just upend the temples; he upended Judas says he upended our entire system, and
Hmm.
Philip saying no, he's upending the misuse and the abuse of the system, and they
Hmm.
argue about that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of what do you do when you don't understand?
Hmm.
And Judas, we know what Judas does because he doesn't understand. What
Yep.
does Matthew do? What does Peter do? We don't see it this season, but we know that one of the things Peter does ultimately is slice off a guy's ear, right?
Hmm.
How can, after following Jesus for 3 years, you think that slicing off someone, or I'm sure he was trying to kill him, but think that killing a Roman soldier is the way to go?
Hmm.
But they just don't understand. And
Hmm.
so I think that's going to be a strong takeaway for a lot of viewers is, am I willing to still follow
Hmm.
when I don't understand? And that's what happened in that scene with Judas that got some controversy for the whole Jesus praying for him thing. But a lot of people took away like, wow, I really am that way sometimes when Jesus
Hmm.
says to him, so if I don't do what you think I should do,
Hmm.
will you still believe? Right.
Hmm.
I think will you still believe? I hadn't thought of it until this moment. That might be a good, like a good theme for
Hmm.
the season. Will you still believe when you don't understand?
Yeah, I like that as a encapsulation. And that's so relevant. Like we can all put ourselves in places where we really want God or Jesus to do something and he doesn't do it. And why isn't he doing that? So yeah, oh, that's going to be a really powerful thing. And yeah, just speaking to that kind of that controversy, it's kind of a tragedy that that really kind of powerful message that you've got in there in some ways got overshadowed by people picking apart things, I feel like a little bit unfairly. um, yeah, I'm curious for you as a creator with The Chosen. It seems like every season there's some sort of controversy like that where people are coming at something like a line or a scene or whatever that they don't like. What's it like for you to kind of have to face that kind of regular cycle of controversy or criticism?
Well, I'm it came with the territory from day one. So I think if you're going into to make a Jesus show, and if you want it to have any level of success or viewership, which of course we wanted it to have viewership, if you're not prepared and secure enough in your relationship with Christ to for criticism, then you really, really needed to reevaluate what you're doing and why you did it. So it's not the controversy I couldn't care less about. I couldn't care less about criticism. Um, what I do care about are two things. One, I do want it to be fair and accurate, meaning
Yes.
like if someone says, I don't believe Jesus ever would have needed to prepare for a sermon because he he was God and he didn't need, the words just came freely to him and he was always accessing the Father's wisdom, yada, yada. Well, that's a fair point and something that we can debate and discuss. And, but even in a fair or reasonable discussion, if they would have said something like, um, The Chosen shows Jesus completely confused, completely unable to ever figure out what he wants to say. He's a stumbling, bumbling moron. And, then I go, well, okay, now we can't have a fair and reasonable discussion because you're exaggerating or you're outright lying.
Yeah.
And so in the Judas thing, when someone posts, Jesus never prayed for Judas to change his mind. Well, I'm like, well, maybe. I mean, he might have actually, because he prayed for God to change the Father to change his mind when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Mm,
But I didn't even say that he prayed for Jesus to change his mind. Judas
mm,
changed his mind. He just said, "I'll pray for you." Like, why do you have to imprint on it more than that? Why can't we
mm,
have a reasonable discussion
mm,
about whether or not Jesus prayed for Judas in the last week, in the context of at the Last Supper when he was praying for his disciples? He specifically said, I'm not applying this prayer to Judas, to the betrayer. This is only for my 11 disciples, for the other 11. So you can make a reasonable argument that during Holy Week, Jesus would have never prayed for Judas, because the one time he did pray for the disciples in the Last Supper, he left Judas out, right? Fair. But I just want you to be accurate, because then we can have a
yeah.
reasonable discussion and people can learn from it. So
Yeah.
that's the only thing that bothers me. The other thing is when it's kind of what I call the all or nothing, now or never crowd,
Mm,
which is anything that if you say one thing that I disagree with, that makes you now wrong, not only wrong about this, which I think is arrogant, but it makes you potentially wrong about everything. And it makes you no
yeah.
longer in my tribe. And now you are no longer someone we can trust or listen to or watch or whatever.
Mm,
And if you don't correct it now, it's never, if you, it's everything is all or nothing now or never. And all debates can be settled in YouTube comments. And so that's the kind of stuff that I get bothered by, just for the sake of the kingdom, just for the sake of
yeah.
society, just for the sake of societal discourse. That's what I really loved about some of your videos that you've done with other people. I don't
Mm,
remember the name of that one guy who you would analyze episodes with, but you do these like hour-long season 4 analyses, and he really didn't like the Ramos storyline, at least at first. Later, he seemed
mhm,
to kind of be more okay with it. But I was just curious about it because he was a fun, interesting guy, and I
mhm.
like your stuff. What I loved about it was, I don't care if he hated it, if he didn't like it or whatever, but it was so reasonable. He was
Yeah.
acknowledging his own bias at times. He was acknowledging his own strengths and weaknesses, but he was making fair points. And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's healthy. That's good.
Mm,
And he wasn't claiming that he had the monopoly on truth and that
mm.
any disagreement was wrong. So that's the kind of stuff I actually really like and welcome. I actually enjoy some of the discussions, even when they're disagreeing.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the values of doing what you're doing, which is being, a little more speculative at times or a little more creative with the story. You're generating some of these conversations. You're getting us thinking. You're getting us, providing us with space to discuss interesting, like kind of theological, biblical things that we might not have otherwise thought to discuss. Like, yeah, before seeing the scene with Judas, how many people thought about whether Jesus prayed for Judas or not? And so it gets us engaging in that kind of theological conversation in a way that's, I think, regardless of where you come down and whether people agree with where you went with it or don't, I feel like there's still kind of a fruitful, formative thing that's happening there.
Yeah. And you've been a really good part of that. And I appreciate it. It's one of the reasons why I try to tell people about you, is because it's where reasonableness is given full, a full spectrum of opportunity. And I've always just appreciated that.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've grown just by being forced to tackle some of those questions. They, forced me to confront some of my priors and think through, like, I've always assumed this, like, but is that actually how it is? Like, is that what the Bible actually says? So I think it's really been a sharpening experience for me, getting to engage with some of those interesting kind of topics and questions that are raised by the show.
For
So
sure. For sure. I'm glad to hear it.
I'm curious, kind of also going with your kind of experience as a creator. Uh, I'm curious how it's changed as the show has kind of shifted and over time, from being more of a like scrappy grassroots startup where, the first couple seasons, you're just like trying to get enough funding to get through the season and be able to keep going, to where you're at now, where you're a little more established as a franchise. You've got spinoffs that are happening. You've got more partnerships, more kind of cultural influence and stuff like that. How have kind of the challenges that you face as a creator, and even like kind of spiritual challenges, how have those shifted over time?
Well, I will say that on set and in the writing, nothing has changed.
Mm,
The toys that we're playing with are bigger. Um, Things are a little bit more stable when it comes to schedule because we know that Come and See, the nonprofit that finances our episodes, even though they still have to raise the money, they've guaranteed that the money will be there for each season from some they've got some families that have just guaranteed upfront that we can at the very least stay on schedule, and so that helps. So off, away from set, we're not just grinding
mm,
just so that we can know that we're even going to film anything. So
yeah.
that's nice. But on set, the relationship between the actors and myself, the focus that we have, that where we eliminate all the noise outside, whether there's one person watching, 100 people, a million, or now hundreds of millions of people watching,
Hmm.
does not change what we're doing on set, does not
Mm,
change the focus, the lack of concern about how this will be
mm,
received. We really are focused on the art. Personally, I know that my intimacy with God has increased
mm,
because the show has taught me so much about Jesus as an intimate God,
mm,
that he, whether he was healing you or rebuking you or calling you to follow him,
mm,
he spoke directly to your heart need.
mm,
It wasn't salvation, of course, is one size fits all,
mm,
but how he communicates it and how he reaches you, and the problem
mm,
that you have or the question that you have or the method that might be necessary to get you out of your slumber is
mm,
different for each person. And that's been really encouraging to me, and I think that's one of the reasons why that's so reflected in the show.
mm,
There's such an intimacy that's there. And even though season 5 is our biggest and most expansive season yet, our most expensive, the one that looks the biggest,
mm,
it's still intimate. You are still going to
mm,
see the Chosen-esque scenes in every episode
mm,
where it's two people talking, or Jesus praying or crying or sad, or with his mother or with his friends. We never lose sight of that intimacy. So the opportunities are bigger, the scope is bigger, but the core stays the same.
Yeah, I feel like that speaks to something that I've found as I've talked to, some of your cast and people who do other kind of creative stuff with the Bible, like books and stuff like that. And it seems like, a lot of people intuitively get the idea that Bible adaptations like The Chosen are helpful for the audience because they can give us context and help us to see things in new ways and what have you. But what you're saying kind of speaks to how they also are really spiritually formative for the creator themselves, because yeah, as you're kind of digging into these biblical stories and texts, you can't help but kind of be confronted with those things and kind of to see them in a new way. So that's really cool to hear how that's kind of affected you.
Yeah, and my wife Amanda always says we're not free from the lessons of each season. So, the lessons of some of season 3, and then of course in season 4, um, of why God, why them and not me, or why me and not them, um, why must this suffering last? We some of that came during times of our own suffering. Um, uh, when the show, when the disciples or Jesus or whoever is feeling overwhelmed in the show, a lot of times it's reflective of what's happening offset. And that the same goes for growth and blessing. I mean, the ministry of Jesus in the show, ironically enough, is growing rapidly at the same pace that the show has been growing. And so that's been something that we've had to learn while we're
Mm,
writing, is because yeah, we understand what it's like to be part of something that is growing rapidly, has its detractors but also has its supporters, and can
mm.
sometimes be all consuming. And that's been really interesting too, to kind of observe, go, wow, okay, God's been teaching us something so that we can help teach others through the show.
Yeah, that's really cool how kind of the trajectory of Jesus has mirrored the trajectory of the show and some of the lessons that you're learning. I've been encouraged to see some of the ways that you are kind of harnessing kind of that growth and the increased influence and expertise that you have as a creator and using that to kind of support other biblical adaptations and other creators and things like that. So, for example, I know you've provided some consulting to the House of David team, which just released their trailer last week. And yeah, as I was watching that trailer, in some ways there's similarity as far as like the commitment to kind of scripture and the truth of scripture. But on the other hand, there's also kind of unique aspects or distinct aspects of that show where it looks like it has kind of a little different tone or maybe even like almost like genre. So I'm curious, do you think that the success of The Chosen has kind of opened the door for maybe a greater or more diverse array of biblical stories and biblical adaptations?
For sure. I mean, the Bible is now on the brain for the biggest studios and streamers in the world. We've had intense meetings with all of the streamers about the Chosen Universe, about other Bible projects, about the future. In fact, we've got some really big announcements coming up soon about that, and it for sure helped open doors towards projects like House of David. Now, John Irwin, who's the creator of House of David, has had his own success, even well before mine, and so the two of us were working on how can we combine forces. How can we? John's had an idea. I mean, John approached me about a biblical cinematic universe years ago, shortly after he announced it himself, while we had just finished season 1, right? He and I didn't know each other much at the time. And so then The Chosen blows up while he's doing this other movie. At the time it was American Underdog, and I still believe. And then he kind of realizes like, okay, well, you need to continue to do what you're doing. It's not mine to hold on to. And I'm realizing, well, he's had some ideas. He has had some thoughts. How can we combine forces? And we weren't able to make it work on an official level. But as you've mentioned, I mean, I'm consulting with, I'm on the consulting with the board of the Wonder Project, which is the company that's producing House of David. Been in discussions with Amazon about that project, about other projects, about our own projects. Like there's a lot of us trying to, the whole rising tide lifts all boats idea. I mean, John and his company helped set up Best Christmas Pageant Ever at Lionsgate. Kingdom Story Company is one of the producers of Best Christmas Pageant Ever. John's no longer with Kingdom Story Company, but it's like we're all trying to elevate each other and help each other out. And you're right, House of David, originally we were thinking, could this potentially be a chosen project that John does? And not only did we not make it work kind of on an official level, but it was also like this is different enough that I don't know that we kind of agreed it doesn't quite fit into chosen canon, but it fits into biblical canon. And it comes from the same heart and spirit. It's created by someone who loves scripture, who wants to be faithful to scripture, but also wants to open up the creative and artistic license to bring these stories to life even more. So, and then as I told you off before our interview, the Dr. Jesse Stone, who Come and See brought on to oversee a team of people to read all of our scripts and make sure that they're copacetic. He didn't use the whole team, but himself, he read the scripts and gave some consult and some advice, and then ended up endorsing the project as well. So we try to help each other out where we can, give advice where we can, recommend crew or cast members to each other when we can. And so I think that's going to continue. I know it's going to continue.
Cool. So that makes me think, with The Chosen kind of transitioning into not just being a single show, but a franchise, with Chosen Adventures this year and Joseph and Moses and The Way of the Chosen down the line. What would you say kind of unifies the Chosen properties apart from kind of their common biblical source, as we are seeing kind of other like types of biblical adaptations? Like what is kind of some of the unifying features of like the Chosen universe?
Yeah, the chosen way. What are the things that make us uniquely chosen? Well, I think you can even tell from the House of David trailer, and John will be the first to tell you. He's like, I'm big, I go broad. It's bright color. I don't even mean literally bright colors, but he mean like when I say something or when I do something or when I project something, it is a big, bold thing. And I'm much more about the slow burn, the small moments. I think our 4 brand identifiers for the Chosen that are on our wall, that kind of infuse our marketing, infuse our show, infuse our live, infuse our company. It's intimate, authentic, not in any particular order, but intimate, authentic, playful and disruptive. And
Mm.
so I would say you're going to find our shows more intimate than John's show or movies,
Yeah.
right? When John does a Bible project, it's going to be bigger,
Yeah.
broader. We're going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate. Even on the authentic side, I wouldn't say John's inauthentic at all.
Mhm.
But like when you saw in the trailer, like the Goliath comes out as the big, he's John's leaning into the version of the story that's bigger and broader and potentially more thematic than realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible that Goliath was 9 feet 9 or whatever, but
Mhm.
or taller or whatever, but it's probably unlikely. But for the purpose of the story, it doesn't, it's not inauthentic. It's just he's always going to err on the side of bigger and broader and more thematic. And I'm always going to err on the side of like what feels like real human beings did,
Yeah.
and the kinds of dialogue. I mean, my dialogue is um, much more, again, I don't want to use words that imply that his isn't, but like much more human in the sense of there's interruptions. There's a lot of
Mm.
casual comments. We take our time. Again, John's brother Andy called me the king of the slow burn, where
Mm.
the arc and the moments take a long time to develop.
Mm.
John and his brother, when they do projects, are a little bit quicker, a little bit bigger, a little bit more
Mm.
in your face. So it's that kind of thing. I think even when we do Joseph, even when we do Moses,
Mm.
you're going to find it's on a massive grand scale. It's
Mhm.
not going to be about God splitting the water so they can walk across. It's
Yeah.
about before that happens, Moses' brother going, "What the heck are you doing? And why are we doing this?
Mm.
And this is crazy." And his sister, wondering how she's going to take care of her kids. I mean,
Mm.
those are the things that we're going to be emphasizing more than how the waters got parted.
Yeah, I feel good because like that was when I was kind of like trying to put a finger on. This was actually I was comparing The Chosen to Mary, and one of the kind of distinctions that I tried to draw is like some biblical adaptations they go for more of like the kind of the mythic or like
Yes.
the kind of transcendent, like larger than life dimensions of the biblical story, whereas others are like The Chosen are focused more on kind of making it relatable, making it feel like something where we could walk into this and we could see ourselves in this story. There are situations, there are characters that feel connected to our own lives that we can see ourselves in. So yeah, that I feel like that kind of resonates with some of the stuff that you're
Yeah, I
saying
saw
too.
what you said about the Mary project on Netflix,
Yeah,
and there's lots of differences between us and that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
but yeah, there's some of the things that they did that aren't wrong
yeah,
are just very different.
yeah,
It's a lot of what you'd call ethereal.
hmm,
It's thematic. It's poetic.
yeah,
My co-writer Tyler brings a lot of that in, and so when that happens in the show, it's typically almost always Tyler's influence. But I'm always taking it from the heavens and bringing it to earth, right? And we're even going through that right now as we're finishing up our writing on season 6, the crucifixion. There's so many big themes that we want to communicate and visuals we want to communicate. And Tyler had some huge ideas for some supernatural stuff. And I'm like, all right, some of this is really great. Some of this is really great, but I can't use it just because it's not me. I'm not good at it. That's not what the show is. And then some of it is like, it just needs to be humanized
hmm,
at the same time as something supernatural is happening. And so that's why I think we ultimately make a good team. And I think that is the chosen way though. It is profoundly human. And that's what I hear from people when they meet me in an airport or I'm recognized at a restaurant. And they say, "Thank you. The show just feels so real, so human,
hmm,
so accessible, so authentic."
yeah.
And I think that's our calling card.
Yeah, that's definitely some of the aspects of the show that I've really appreciated. Speaking as someone who's aspiring with screenwriting or just Bible adaptation and stuff like that, do you have any other tips on kind of your process or philosophy of taking biblical stories and bringing them to the screen?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is start with the end and work your way backwards. Start with the thing that you have to do. You know where the story ends. You know that you're going to get to the big scriptural moment, or otherwise people
Mm,
aren't going to want to watch it. It's like they can watch historical dramas anywhere. If they want to watch this one because it has some Bible stories that they've known and loved, but they want to see it brought to life in a certain way. So when we first sat down to do The Chosen and plot it out, Ryan and Tyler and I got in my basement in Elgin, Illinois, and we started with the ascension, the birth of the early church,
hmm,
the resurrection. Now, not all of this will be covered in the Mothership show, but we started and we're like, let's figure out where the show is going to end, season 7, and then let's write to that. And then
Mm,
let's figure out where season 1's going to end. So we knew early on
mm,
season 1 was going to end with the woman at the well. Um, Jesus announcing himself as Messiah for the first time publicly and giving his disciples and other people permission to spread the word.
mm,
Okay, so that's interesting. Well, who would be the most excited about that? Well, Peter,
mm,
Simon at the time, because he's someone who's always going to want to just tell everyone and do everything and be a bull in a china shop. So we kind of built his arc in that direction.
mm,
For episode 1, how do we want episode 1 to end?
mm,
We want Mary Magdalene to be redeemed, the
mm,
demons cast out of her, because we know that she had
mm,
demons cast out of her. So, okay, let's write to that, and let's figure out what's going to cause someone to be demon possessed.
mm,
What's going to make her need redemption? What's the trauma in her past that would make
mm,
Jesus's arrival so meaningful? And so that leads to things like Isaiah 43 being used as a tool to introduce Mary to Scripture, and then ultimately to introduce Jesus to Mary. Those are the kinds of things that come out of that. But you first, I think, if I had a tip, it would be start with your ending and work your way backwards, and kind of
mm.
build towards that. And I think that's why we've done, I think, a fairly good job of justifying some of the big moments. They feel earned because we knew we needed to get there and make those moments impactful. So how do we orchestrate a story using some scripture, some historical background, some cultural background, and then artistic imagination that can all make this powerful Bible moment really sing?
Yeah, I've definitely felt that. Even, yeah, looking at the way that you started the show with Mary Magdalene and how that is kind of setting things up for, she's the first witness from the show's perspective to Jesus, performing a miracle for her, and then she's going to be the first witness to him after the resurrection. There's just so many like interesting little ways that you're setting up things all along the way. So that's been really cool to see. I'm curious. One of the challenges I imagine in writing a show where a lot of the audience knows where things are going to go. A lot of modern television, it relies on suspense and people not knowing where things are going to go. But with you, people know characters like Judas or Peter or Jesus, obviously, like where they're ultimately going to end up. So what's it like to kind of tackle writing characters like that?
Well, you just want to make the journey interesting. I mean, you think of a movie like Titanic. Not only did the audience already know historically that it's going to end in a crash, they opened the movie by
Mm,
showing you on a computer graphic. He's like, and so here's what happened. And then the boat broke like this, and then it sank this way. This is at the beginning. Like we haven't
mm,
gotten to there yet. Like they're literally like if you were just watching this movie in a vacuum,
mm,
even if you didn't know the history of the story, you'd be
mm.
like, why in the world would you give away the ending at the very beginning? Well, it's
Yeah,
because we know the ending, and it's not
yeah.
about the boat sinking. It's about the people on the boat who experienced it and what. And so what they did was they made it so that when you got to the boat sinking, you weren't thinking about the mechanics of it. You weren't getting lost in
Mm,
the geography of it. You already know that. You saw it in a computer generated image. So now you're
mm,
just focused on the people.
mm,
And so we are doing this something similar.
yeah,
Judas is going to betray Jesus. It's literally the most famous betrayal in the history of humans. We can't try to make it feel like it's a surprise. So the surprise needs to be, how do we introduce Judas? What's his
yeah.
background? What's his motivation? What's his journey to get there? So that by the time you get to the betrayal, you haven't been focused on the mechanics of the betrayal.
Mm,
You're actually now focused on Judas and his sister and his relationship with the other disciples. And oh my gosh, are the disciples going to figure it out? Or is
mm,
what the scene that we revealed that we give you a sneak
yeah.
peek of what was it like? Judas coming to Jesus and asking him for more responsibility and
Mm,
all this stuff. So that's the stuff that we just do. We try to do in surprising and unique ways, so that
mm,
you're focused more on the person than you are the event.
yeah. That makes sense. I'm curious as you say that. It may be like trying to choose like one of your favorite children, but do you have a favorite character to write?
Yeah, it is like choosing my favorite children. All of them have pieces of myself and Ryan and Tyler in them. I enjoy the challenge slash opportunity of writing Matthew in his spectrum
Mm,
brain because I know that world fairly well. I have a family member on the spectrum. To quote one of my favorite comics, it nicked me as well. Like autism kind of nicked me. I'm not autistic, but I've got bits of it.
mm,
And so I like the challenge of kind of writing each of those characters in their own voices. It can be very easy
mm,
to just kind of write all the dialogue the same, but Matthew's simplicity and straightforwardness. Nathaniel, it's fun to write Nathaniel because he doesn't have huge long scenes or big monologues,
mm.
but he's just great for that zinger right in the middle of a scene, or we have a good moment this season that's just pure Nathaniel that I like. Yeah, so there, I also like writing. I'll say this: I think probably my favorite relationship to write is Mary, Mother, and Jesus. Like I loved writing. I mean, we all three of us write everything, but some scenes are more mine than others, and some scenes are more Ryan's than others. The scene that was really mine more than others was Mary washing Jesus's hair.
Mm,
I really love writing things like Jesus saying, "Don't lick your thumb and wipe my face," because it's such a mom thing to do, and
yeah.
how her fingers got caught in his hair, and talking about his soiled diapers when he was a baby, and um, all that kind of stuff like that. That to me, I love that mother son relationship and what that would look like. I wrote the episode in season 3, episode 3, Jesus going to his hometown. So those scenes between Jesus and his mother, I really, really love. So I'd say that's probably my favorite, but I wouldn't necessarily say Mary Mother is my favorite character to write. It's just that
Mhm.
relationship I really love when I can get those two together.
Yeah, some of those moments with them, and also, I mean, it's a very brief moment, but a very powerful one in season 2, episode 3, where she's washing his feet. Yeah,
Yeah. I
just
mean,
a really
yeah.
powerful dynamic between them that I know, like, yeah, I think probably just kind of is one of the powerful ways that the show has humanized Jesus, not in the sense of like lowering him from being divine or anything, but just in showing what would it actually have meant, like practically and relationally, for him to be a flesh and blood human who had a mother and had a relationship with her. So yeah, I've really enjoyed uh, that relationship in the show as well. I'm curious, you're not just a biblical storyteller yourself, but you're actually like a second generation biblical storyteller. Your father, Jerry B. Jenkins, he co-wrote the massively popular Left Behind books, which are kind of in a way like a speculative adaptation of Revelation. And then I know he also wrote some books based on like the Gospels or other biblical stories. How do you feel like you have been influenced creatively by your father?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny growing up, we were always the ones having these speculative conversations.
Hmm.
What would it have been like to be Jesus's sibling? What would it have been like to be Jesus's friend at school? What would it have been like to sit around the campfire with Jesus telling jokes? What would
Hmm.
it have been like to play a game with Jesus? Like if you're playing
Hmm.
poker with Jesus, does he just always know your cards? We were always doing it from a humor, sometimes a humorous standpoint, but
Hmm.
my dad has always been, whether he's writing fiction, nonfiction, or historical fiction,
Hmm.
always been like what would it have been like? And my dad's always just been a good storyteller.
Hmm.
I'm not, I don't think I could write a book from scratch like he can. He's done
Hmm.
over 200 of them, which is extraordinary and mind numbing. And I don't think I could ever do it, but he's not necessarily a great screenwriter. He couldn't do what I do. And
Hmm.
so we've always complimented each other in that way, but absolutely. I just learned he was always the funniest guy in the room growing up.
Hmm.
Humor was always a huge part of our lives. And I think, and humor is a big part of my life. And I think that the sense of humor is what causes you to think outside the box.
Hmm.
Humorists don't necessarily see things as they are. They see things as,
Hmm.
how can we make this funny? How can we make this uh, dramatic? How can we, because even the construct of a joke is oftentimes
Yeah.
the same construct of drama.
Mm.
And so how do you set this up so that the punchline really hits hard,
Huh.
or how do you use a callback so that
Hmm.
the aha moment for the audience really
Hmm.
hits. So whether you use it's comedy or pathos, I think they're different sides of the same coin. And I definitely got that from my dad.
Mm. That's encouraging to me, just to be reminded in my relationship with my daughters, like just the formative value of having those kind of little conversations, like thinking out like what would happen if you were Jesus's friend and you guys were playing a game together or whatever. And in a way, like in creating the show, you're kind of sharing that dynamic that you had, like that kind of speculative, like imagining, like, oh, what would have happened if you were relating to Jesus as his mother or as
Yeah.
his childhood friend or
Yeah, and
whatever.
that's what I mean. That's ultimately what any creative enterprise is you're it's an artist sharing their art, their heart, their mind with the world. And that's why sometimes, and I don't mean this in a snarky way, but sometimes when people criticize the show,
Mm,
I'm like, well, then do your own show. And I'm not even saying
yeah,
that it's like, this is I'm bringing you my artistic vision for it.
yeah,
If I was claiming it was gospel, if I was claiming it was God inspired, that would be problematic. But I'm not.
sure,
I'm saying go read the Bible. That's the Bible. I'm giving
yep,
you my artistic interpretation, my theological interpretation with
yeah,
guardrails from other people but who also come from like I'm not hiring or bringing on consultants who are on the opposite side of the theological
yeah,
spectrum from me, because that's not going to be very helpful to me because I'm not trying to do something that lands in the middle. I'm not
yeah,
trying to do something that's the ecumenical in the
mm,
sense that, well, I need to make sure I appease the Catholics here and I please the
mm,
Mormons here. Like I'm an evangelical, a conservative
hmm,
evangelical, giving you my vision for this.
hmm,
And so I I believe the show has become ecumenical in the sense that because I happen to be focused so much on Jesus
mm,
and not religion,
yep,
I actually think a Protestant is uniquely suited to do a show. Like I don't think a show
mm,
can be as successful as The Chosen if it's done through too specific of a religious lens, right?
that makes sense.
And I'm not saying this critically, I'm not saying this negatively, but if it was too Catholic,
Yeah,
too Mormon, too Greek Orthodox or whatever, you would see that.
mm,
There would be things in it that felt exclusive or exclusionary
mm,
to evangelicals. So even Mel Gibson, even The Passion of the Christ, which
hmm,
was Catholic-ish,
hmm,
and there were some inside things that were very Catholic-y, but they just kind of went over the heads of some evangelicals.
yeah,
I don't know that if he did a show, he could do it the same way. I don't think.
mm,
I think if a four multi-season show was as Catholic as Mel Gibson is, I don't
mm,
think it would have quite the broad appeal. But then at the end of the day, I am a Protestant evangelical conservative who has a specific point of view, and that's what I'm bringing to the world.
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Like because of kind of that Protestant evangelical background, it tells you to kind of focus on the text, focus on like just bringing that to life, and not kind of trying to impose kind of additional um, concepts or like
Religiosity onto it,
yeah,
not a formality of a church or of a theological construct. We're focusing on the human beings. We're focusing on Jesus, and I think that ends up working well for a TV show.
hmm,
And I don't feel obligated to a church to satisfy certain check marks or
mm,
certain boundaries. That if this was done through a church, or if I was a member of a larger, denomination, or a member of a
hmm,
larger even religion or faith
mm,
tradition, I might feel compelled to kind of see everything through that lens.
mm.
And I thought that's not the purpose of the show.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely have appreciated that. Like yeah, it just feels like you're trying to bring the gospels to light, and as a result of that, it does have crossover appeal because people from multiple different traditions look to the gospels and can benefit from that, just kind of seeing some of the aspects of the Gospels brought to life. But yeah, but it doesn't feel like you're kind of pushing a particular agenda with that. So yeah, you know, episode 3 of season 1 continues to be like one of my personal favorite episodes, and it's also the only one that I've shared so far with my daughters because they're still kind of young. But I'm excited for the Chosen Adventures coming with that. How long has like did you, when you kind of first came up with the Chosen, was that like an inkling in your mind, like, oh, maybe down the road we could do like a show that's more focused for kids, or is that something that kind of emerged as you were?
Yeah, no, it wasn't when we first launched The Chosen, or when we first started writing it. I mean, you got to, and I think you know this, but our origin story is, I mean, we didn't even know if we were going to be able to do any
Yeah,
episodes,
yeah,
and then we
yeah,
were able to do the first 4. We didn't know if we are going to get to do the next 4,
yep,
and so just getting a show going was insane. But it was fairly early on when it started to get success, and it started to feel like, okay, this is working. This is gonna, I think we're gonna do 7 seasons, whether it's low budget or not.
yep,
We started hearing about the response to episode 3 of season 1, and we started thinking like it would be fun to do like a spin-off show with those kids.
hmm,
And Daryl Eves, my co-founder, was really on top of it. I mean, really excited
mm,
about that. So I was more of a, can we please give it a minute? Can we please?
yep,
And he's like, no, 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 we need to start developing this now because
mm,
animation takes so
takes a
long. And
while.
so it wasn't immediate, but it's been at least 5 years
Mm,
that it's been on the brain, and that we knew we wanted to kind of do it through the eyes of Abby and Joshua from season 1.
hmm,
And then Ryan Swanson, the head writer of the Mothership show with me, initially it was kind of, we were just assigning him to kind of help put together a concept and maybe assemble some writers and then he ended up taking it on so much and took so much ownership of it
mm,
that he became the showrunner. And so a lot of this has been in development
yep,
and has kind of developed over time. But man, I mean, just the other day I was giving notes on a couple of the episodes that are still in process, and it is fun, man. It is going to be
mm,
beautiful. Like visually, we're doing things that aren't typical in an animated
mm,
project, but are really beautiful. It's the chosen way. We're gonna be disruptive and playful, but also authentic and intimate.
yeah. I'm really excited. Roughly, I know like I don't think you've announced like a specific date for it, but roughly, like, is that coming like fall, or are you ready to?
Yeah, this year for sure. I don't know exactly. Could be
Okay.
late summer, early fall. We just we as soon as we're ready, we'll announce it. It's just we always like to make sure we're focused first on making sure it's great and that it's ready, and that takes time. So, but yeah, that'll come out this year. The Chosen Adventures with Bear Grylls will come out this year. We know that for sure. And then,
It's awesome.
but we will give dates as we have them.
Yeah. Well, bringing things back full circle, episodes 1, 2, season 5, premiering in theaters March 7th, I think. Any kind of final thoughts that you'd like to leave people with as they're anticipating the new season?
I just can't wait for season 5 to come out. I it's been right now, and if I ask for, if you're watching this in real time or soon after we record this, prayers are appreciated because I'm putting the final touches on the scripts for season 6, and I've got like 7 days of writing left, and I've got a lot more than 7 days of work to do, and to hit our deadlines and everything. And so it's just really overwhelming and challenging and stressful. But the thing that's kind of keeping me excited is like, yeah, but we get to release season 5 soon, and people are going to see that. It's just so fun.
Mm,
We've got a big important live stream coming up
mm,
Sunday, February. What's this Sunday? This Sunday is the 9th, so it's February 16th,
okay.
where we've got so much news to bring you and announcements to
Mm,
make and big important information about the future of the Chosen, the future of the universe, opportunities to be involved in season 6.
mm,
It's just so much going on that I'm going to be sharing. So I'm excited about that. So just stay tuned to our social media and pay
mm,
close attention. But ultimately, man, I mean, this is, I really want to point people, if you're watching right now, to really keep engaging with Kevin's content as well. I really do. I am passionate about people, you know, I call it the "and now what?" Okay, you're watching the show, you've watched the show, and now what? What are you going to do with this? If it's
Mhm.
just a show and you just wanted to be entertained or moved, that's great. That's fine. There's no obligation to do more, but I love it when so many people go, "Gosh, I want to dive deeper into the Bible. I want to understand some of this better." Um, Kevin Keating is a great resource, and I hope people will subscribe. You know, click all the buttons that you're always telling them to click, and that everyone we always tell people to click notification, click subscribe. Um, I'm a supporter of your is it Patreon or is it just
Buy me coffee.
yeah, it's called Buy Me a Coffee. Yeah. Um, of your website. I contribute financially to it because I believe in it and want it to succeed. And I also know that it's not going to influence your content. It's not like because I support it, you're going to now be nicer. If you have anything that you disagree with, I know you'd say it, but it's just a great content. So I hope people continue to check it out.
Thanks, Dallas. Yeah, that's just so humbling and encouraging. Likewise, I mean, uh, most people who are listening or reading anything that I'm doing are already big fans of the show. But if there's any random person who, for some reason, is still watching this video and has not checked out The Chosen, yeah, definitely do that. Definitely check out the season 5 in theaters because yeah, like I said earlier, I'm really excited just seeing the visuals. And I know that writing wise and in terms of the themes and the theology, there's going to be a lot of real deep and moving stuff happening this season. So and thanks so much for joining me here as well. I know that people have probably been really gaining a lot from all the stuff you've been sharing. I've personally yeah, just learned stuff as we've been talking. So really appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Great to talk to you. And we'll talk again soon.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for listening to the Bible Artist podcast. Godspeed.
Yep. Bye bye.